Okay, well, good evening or good morning, wherever you might be. I'm very happy to be here. Thanks again to the good folks at Tuten Berlin and all of you for joining this session or series of teachings on the uh, recognizing the false I, the illusory I. So my name is Tenzin Namjong, and I see a couple new faces this week. That's good. And as you mentioned, we do have these sessions up on YouTube afterwards. So if you did miss the first session, or you have to miss another session live, then you can reach it afterwards. So let us jump right in. Although first, as it is tradition emphasized in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, then it's very important to set a good motivation. Well, with everything we do, but particularly when we engage in some kind of Dharma activity, to adjust our motivation, thinking that the purpose of our life is to benefit all sentient beings. And in order to benefit sentient beings in the best way, we must first develop our inner qualities of wisdom, compassion, loving kindness, and so forth. And therefore, in order to do that, we're now going to participate in this lecture, the meditation, and so forth, and think that our efforts, our energy that we are putting forth will only become the cause for all sentient beings, vast as the vastness of space, to quickly transcend all suffering and attain the state of enlightenment as quickly as possible. So, okay. Can you see that? All right.
Yes, we can.
Go to reading view here. So then, generally we do the preliminary prayers here, taking refuge in Jhana and Bodhicitta. So those of you, you might be familiar with this stanza in other contexts. Here, you see this third line. Usually it is by my merits of generosity and so forth. But here, before teaching, we change that to listening to the Dharma. And then also later, when you give a Dharma teaching, then you would say, by my merits of explaining the Dharma. So yeah, you'll often notice that. Okay. We recite 3 times. I take refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddha, Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly by my merits of listening to the Dharma. May I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. I take refuge until I'm enlightened in the Buddha, Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly by my merits of listening to the Dharma. May I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. I take refuge until I am enlightened in the Buddha, Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly by my merits of listening to the Dharma. May I become a Buddha to benefit transmigratory beings. Okay. So now, just to review what we covered last week. So we were setting the context and putting this recognizing the false I and the meditation on selflessness or emptiness in the larger context of the Buddhist teaching. And in that context, then we described how actually this false view of the I is the kind of root of all samsaric suffering. It's the root of all of our problems. And then the only way to uproot this root of samsara, as it were, is then to cultivate the wisdom realizing selflessness, the wisdom realizing emptiness. So we've gone through also 3 quotations from Lama Tsongkhapa's principal aspect of the path, showing the need for these minds of renunciation or the wish wanting to be free from samsara, and also the wish of bodhicitta, the wish to achieve enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. But then, as Lama Tsongkhapa said, even if you have the mind of renunciation and bodhicitta, if you do not have the wisdom realizing ultimate reality, you cannot cut the root cause of circling. Therefore, the wise generate or make effort realizing dependent origination. So, I thought this week, since our teachings um, are based on this new collection of teachings from Lama Zopa Rinpoche, recognizing the false I, and I hope you've all downloaded that and read that in the week, in between our teachings. As I was going through that text, I noticed there's a few parts that maybe could use a little bit extra explanation. And so I thought we could now go through some of those parts of the text and, well, help you unlock the deeper meaning. So let me share this part. Okay. So here is this text. Okay. So right here at the beginning, recognizing the false I. Yeah, you can see. Okay. So this is what we basically covered last week with the importance of recognizing the false I. Okay. So then this is what we talked about with the, do I need to zoom in? Yeah. Okay. This is what we were talking about with, first the kind of quintessential meditation on emptiness that is found in the Lam Rim is this analysis of the four vital points. So we had introduced this reasoning, and then we talked about this first one, the vital point of recognizing the object to be refuted. So the object to be refuted, the object of negation, we then were saying, since we have this wrong view that holds on, yeah, holds on to this false notion of the I, we have to recognize what it is that the mind is holding on to. Otherwise, how can we refute it, right? So then here, Rinpoche discussing that, gives these analogies of trying to milk a cow, but kind of looking in the wrong place, or not the best analogy these days, but wanting to shoot your enemy, but then not being able to distinguish, then actually shooting someone who is your friend, or recognizing the thief and all this. So in any way, point is this step of correctly identifying the object of negation is what is then going to be able help us be able to fall into the two extremes, right? So we normally talk about this middle way, right? The Majjhimika, this middle way, and that is the middle way between the two extremes of nihilism and eternalism, right? So both of those extremes, then we fall into by not properly identifying the object of negation, right? If we negate too much, then we fall into the extreme of nihilism, that nothing exists, right? But if we don't, refute enough, then we still remain in the camp of eternalism, or grasping to the intrinsic reality. So I think last week I gave this, the example of the child who, believes there's a monster in the closet, right? Hmm? So then you could imagine, right, the correct thing the parents would do, they'll go to the closet, open it up, and then the child sees there's no monster at all, right? But you could imagine if then the child goes to the parents and the parents say, oh, no, no, don't worry, don't worry. there's definitely no two-headed monster in your closet. No two-headed monster, right? Then that still leaves the possibility for a one-headed monster, a three-headed monster, 18-headed monster, who knows, right? So then the child will be like, oh, no, okay, it's good there's no two-headed one, but please help me understand there's no monster at all, right? So refuting a kind of two-headed monster in this case would be like not going far enough in our object negation. Okay? So anyway, that is then about, yeah, the importance of recognizing the false I. In other words, the importance of recognizing the object negation. And it's also important to note here, see, when we already say the false I, even this kind of language, the importance of recognizing the false I, then it helps us to understand that we also are not going to fall into nihilism. We are not refuting the I like full stop, right? So since that object that is held on by the ignorant mind is the false I, that one doesn't exist. But any analysis we do in this regard is just about the false I. It's not about the I full stop. So, therefore, any sort of meditation that we're going to do, any analysis that we're going to do in this ultimate realm of reality, then it's not going to be able to destroy the worldly conventions. And the worldly conventions are just sort of the kinds of things that the world accepts without too much philosophical sophistication or investigation, right? So I like to say, you know, someone totally untrained in philosophy, if you were to ask them, do you exist? Do cars exist? Do tables exist? Do houses exist? They'd say, yes, of course, right? So we are not going to then lose the conventional reality, right? Uh, Chandrakirti in his Majjhimika Avatara, the supplement to the middle way, he's very clear in saying, uh, Jikten Tanye Malakshik. So Jikten Tanye is worldly convention. Malak is like don't lose or don't destroy the worldly convention. He also emphasizes how the Buddha did not come to the world or it did not come to argue with the world, right? So that means the worldly conventions that the people untrained in philosophy still remain untouched, okay? And in that way, we don't fall into nihilism. All right. So now this next section, suffering and how to free yourself from it. So yeah, talks about the need then, because the root of all samsara is this grasping to the false view of the I, then we see the need to, analyze. Hmm, hold on, I'm going to share something else. This is what we went through last week, but just to review. Hmm, where did you go? Ale. Okay. Can you see this?
No, I can't see anything.
No? Okay, hold on a second. Mhm. Okay, here we go. Right. Right. So then we were talking about this, the order in which the afflictions arise, right? And so we had this thought, once there's the idea of the self, then there's the idea of the other. On behalf of self and others, there is attachment and hostility. All the faults come about in association with these, yeah, from Dharmakirti. So this uh, is cited in the section of Lam the true cause of suffering, right? We have the true suffering, then true cause of suffering. Okay. And then we also saw this, in their minds, yogi perceive that all afflictions and all faults arise from the reifying view of the perishing aggregates. And knowing that the self is the object of that view, they refute that self, Chandrakirti. So um, then, Rinpoche was also very fond of citing this next quotation as well from the Lamrim Chenmo in his teachings. So here, Lama Tsongkhapa says that ignorance superimposes an intrinsic nature on things. From this, attachment, hostility, and so forth arise, further superimposing features such as attractiveness or unattractiveness upon that intrinsic nature. And therefore, reason can also be used to eradicate the way that attachment and so forth, oh, and oh, and such apprehends objects. Okay, so this is a very important point. So I wanted to talk about this a little bit. Yeah. Okay. Let's stop the share. So, we all have this notion, right? We all know the saying, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, right? Beauty is on the mouth. Okay. So what does that mean? It's actually very related to emptiness, right? There's no intrinsic beauty from the side of the object. Rather, in the eye of the beholder means the person perceiving that, then they are the ones that will label or assign beauty to the object. There's nothing intrinsic from the object's own side. Yes, that's what it means. Okay. Also, there's a Latin saying, I don't know it by heart, but the translation is something like, there is no disputing about taste, meaning how things taste. Well, if you go to a meal and you're sharing the food and you taste something, oh, this is the best momo I've ever had, and then you're like, oh, here, try one, and then the other one's like, oh, no, 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 I don't like this one, I want this. So then, depending on people's particular taste, some people like spicy, some people like whatever, the fried momos, other people just want the steamed, you know, and there's no sort of kind of objective way where you can go in and say, no, no, this person's right and this person's wrong, right? On some level, we understand that, I think, but you can also imagine a situation, right? All right, these have gone, a little bit out of style these days, and rightly so, but it is a good uh, kind of thought experiment, right? You imagine, they used to have these beauty contests, right? Miss Universe, right? Then they have the finalists, right? And they'll have, whoever, Miss Argentina, Miss Sweden, and Miss Thailand, okay? Then you're watching with your friends, the finalists are on stage, and then you're like, okay, yes, it definitely has to be Miss Thailand. And then your friend is like, what are you talking about? No, no, no. Miss Sweden, for sure. Like, look again. What are you, blind? And then your other friend is like, no, 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 it has to be Miss Argentina, right? Okay. So, point is, the fact that you're having this argument, you know, look again, what are you, blind, right? Then it shows that we hold actually a very deep-seated belief in the beauty being intrinsically established on the object, right? Or we can imagine that at the meal, right? Oh, what? You didn't like this momo? Here, no, have another one. Try again, right? It's as if, for example, if I have, I don't know, a coffee mug or something, and then we're trying to weigh it, okay? And I weigh it, and it's 200 grams, uh, 5 ounces, right? So then someone else weighs it, okay, also 5 ounces. Then someone else weighs it, and it's 10 ounces. I say, whoa, whoa, wait a minute, whoa, whoa. maybe your scale is broken, like try again, check the batteries, what's going on, right? Because the notion, if that uh, mug or whatever we're weighing is 5 ounces on my scale, everyone else's scale should be the same, right? So then similarly, right? Our mind, oh, this is the most beautiful one, this is the most delicious one, like this. If I perceive it in that way, because I have this belief that is somehow intrinsically established in the object, then other people who disagree with me, there must be something wrong with them, right? Now, unfortunately, hey, it's not just momos and beauty contests that this operates in, right? Even say our political leaders, right? Oh, this one's the best. Oh, yes, the best thing that ever happened to our country. Other ones, this is the worst thing that's ever happened. Hmm? Then you see how much the afflictions really arise, even going to the point, unfortunately, of violence, of these views. That is all then kind of uh, rooted in this intrinsic, the belief in the intrinsic existence of the object, right? It's as if, as it were, right? Yes, we have the intrinsic, the view of intrinsic beauty, attractiveness or unattractiveness, but it's almost like the uh, the kind of coat stand upon which all those intrinsic qualities have to hang is the fundamental belief in the intrinsic existence, right? Because that object cannot be intrinsically beautiful unless it itself just exists intrinsically. You understand? Therefore, mm, okay, oops. Therefore, we see this. Ignorance superimposes intrinsic nature on things. That's the first. Then when we have this, intrinsically existent, uh, object, then we can attribute the features such as attractiveness and unattractiveness upon this intrinsic nature. Okay? Then reason is going to refute that that object exists intrinsically, right? And then that will eradicate the way that the attachment and such, hostility apprehends the object, right? So, well, in other words, and put it another way. Okay, back to our monster in the closet. Okay. Then, okay, the child, yes, is afraid of the monster. But why? Oh, because the monster has, sharp claws, has sharp fangs, like this, right? So if you are able to refute the existence of the monster, then there's no more claws, right? No more claws, no more fangs, no way that the monster can hurt, right? That's the point. So similarly, the fangs and the claws in our belief in intrinsic existence is these other superimposing features. Okay. Mm. So that's an important point. You understand? Okay. Actually, let me say this because in this text, recognizing the false I, okay, then Rinpoche goes through some very so then okay, first he talks about the importance of realizing the false I. Then the point is how this false view of the I then is the root of all samsaric problems. So then in this point in the text, he goes through what those samsaric problems are and talks about, the suffering, suffering of change, and then all pervasive compounded suffering. Okay. So Actually, sorry, I'm going through different texts. Let me go back to my PowerPoint. Okay. So, I want to talk a little bit about these three types of suffering. And first is something I always like to share. Um, in general, when we study Buddhism, especially when we study Buddhism from English translations, then there's always a bit of a problem with translation, right? And so, you know, the first texts were in Sanskrit or maybe Pali, and then it gets translated into Tibetan, and then it gets translated into English, and then always there's a I do a little bit of translation work, and there's always a choice that us translators have to make. We either have to uh, sort of understand the word in the original language, Tibetan, Sanskrit, and then try to find the kind of closest word that's already existing in English, okay? Or we make up a new word, okay, that might not be there in English, right? So most of um, the English translators, they do the former strategy, and they try to find a word that is most similar in English, and they translate like that. Now, this is problematic because sometimes those existing words will have different levels of connotation that, well, may or may not be there in the original word that's being translated. Okay? You understand? So here, dukkha, dukkha. That is the word in Sanskrit. Also Pali, very similar. Yeah, dukkha is now translated as suffering. In Tibetan, it's dungel, dungel. But well, as we'll see, when we normally think about suffering, we think about, pain, right? Such suffering. And yes, that is one element of it. But we see here, there's the three types of suffering, right? And so the suffering is that, right? Suffering of suffering is the pain of, an injury, also the mental pain of, depression or, whatever it might be, whatever it may be. But here, the suffering of change. Suffering of change. So actually, the normal examples they give is like, if you're sitting, you sit for a long time, there's pain, and then you walk. It feels good at first, but then you continue to walk, and then you get tired, you're suffering again, so you want to sit. Or you're cold, so you go in the sun, then you get too hot, then you go back in the cold, like this, right? So those are the examples. But some people then think, oh, the suffering of change is when the walking then becomes suffering. And then suffering of suffering, you know, and then I want to sit down again. But actually, the suffering of change is even the first moment of walking after we've been sitting a long time. That is also suffering, you know, in a sense. So our normal, uh, what we even call samsaric pleasures, you know, the other one they use a lot is it's like eating, right? So momos, you guys know momos, right? So then the first momo, okay, nice. Second, nice. Then, get to like the 12th, or sometimes I can eat more if I'm hungry. Anyway, you get to the 12th momo, then you start feeling, oh, like this. No, no, no. That's not when the suffering of change starts. The suffering of change started at the first momo. But what we talk about is, we have, let's say, a suffering of hunger. Okay. Since we're so hungry, When we eat that first momo, the suffering of hunger kind of goes away a lot. And then we start the suffering of eating momos. That, like net change in the aggregate suffering, we then label as pleasure. But actually, we're just trading one kind of suffering to another. That's why it's said that our contaminated happiness is suffering of change. Contaminated happiness means anything, right? Like in the four seals that signify something as being Buddhist thought, right? We have all compounded phenomena are impermanent. Compounded phenomena is something that arises due to causes and conditions, right? So everything that arises due to causes and conditions is impermanent. That's why we say any being who is born will die, right? Anything arisen from causes and conditions is in the nature of impermanence. So then the second one is all contaminated phenomena are in the nature of suffering, are in the nature of dukkha. That means anything that has arisen due to karma and afflictions is in the nature of suffering. So what that means is, for us, the only kind of happiness that we've ever experienced throughout beginningless samsaric rebirth has actually been suffering of change. You understand? So even when we, eat something tasty, like, an apple, there is some pleasant feeling that comes, right? But the fact that I'm able to have that pleasant feeling from eating the apple is because I accumulated some good karma in a past life, or maybe this life. But since the cause is the contaminated karma, yeah, then that pleasure I derive from the apple is impermanent. Then suffering of change. It is suffering of change. So here, I think that perhaps how I like to sometimes then translate dukkha, it's more encompassing than just mere suffering, but we can say unsatisfactoriness, right? So the fact that our samsaric pleasures don't give lasting happiness, kind of a bummer, a bit unsatisfactory, unsatisfying. That is suffering of change. Okay. So, uh, then I'm going to switch back. Okay. So Rinpoche, he actually gives these very beautiful quotations from all sorts of texts. If you wish all happiness, completely abandon all desire. If you abandon all desire, you achieve supreme happiness. As long as you follow desire, you'll never get satisfaction. When wisdom stops desire, you'll get satisfaction. One who is not satisfied by worldly desire is satisfied by wisdom. One who is satisfied by wisdom does not come under the control of samsara. So, this is beautiful. I think this is the quotation that Rinpoche had written on. So he had a car at Root Institute in Bodh Gaya, and he would put these kind of Dharma slogans. I remember him saying in the teaching, they also had such a van, like a kind of van in the US. And when they would travel to different teachings, he would, put these kind of Dharma slogans on it so that the other people could get some imprints. One thing I did want to say just about this, right? We again have to be a little bit discriminating. So in general, desire gets a bad rap in Buddhist teachings, right? Completely abandon all desire So then in the intro courses I teach, I'm actually in the middle of one now here at Kopan. Often a question comes up and they say, hey, wait a minute. If you're saying desire is bad, then you're telling us we have to, have the wish to attain enlightenment. Isn't that a contradiction? Right? And so if we take this very literally, abandon all desire, then yes, that would be a contradiction. But here, we have to be aware, in this context, okay, we have to distinguish between good desires and not so good ones, right? And so the desire to be happy, the desire that others be happy, the desire for liberation, the desire for enlightenment, right? The desire to engage in beneficial activities, those, yes, we don't want to lose, right? I mean, bodhicitta, that is like the supreme desire, right? So here in these contexts, when it's talking about desire, here we see, right? Worldly desire, worldly desire. Hmm? So the worldly desire, for like in the eight worldly concerns, just mere kind of, sensory pleasures, having good reputation, being praised, these kinds of things, those, those are the ones that are problematic. Because even through the attainment of those, right? All we're attaining is the suffering of change. Understand? We want pleasant experience. We want gain, right? Profit. We want a good reputation. We want people to praise us, whatever. All of those, any satisfaction we get from them is merely the suffering of change. They are not permanent. They're not stable, and therefore they're going to let us down in the end. I want to tell a story. So it's not so much that these objects then, right, are somehow bad in and of themselves, right? There's no intrinsic existence. Um, so of course, given a choice, I'd rather have nice food, I'd rather have a comfy bed, I'd rather be in nice climates and all this. But the point is, and this is discussed in the context of why amongst the Four Noble Truths did the Buddha first teach the truth of suffering. Yeah. You guys should know this from Lamrim Chenmo, right? So normally, right, in the order of how they arise, right? First comes the cause, then comes the effect, right? First we have the seed, and then we have the sprout. Yes? Okay. So normally, causes, yeah, causes come before effects. But then in the Four Noble Truths, truth of suffering and then truth of the cause of suffering, the order is switched. So then a hypothetical uh, challenger asks this question. Why did the Buddha teach in the reverse order? Then the answer is kind of what we saw in the quotation from Lama Zopa and the Three Principles of the Path. Uh, unless we develop the mind that definitely wishes to be free from samsara, there is no wish to pacify the mind seeking pleasurable effects within cyclic existence. Furthermore, craving for samsaric pleasure thoroughly uh, binds the embodied. Therefore, from the outset, seek the mind of renunciation. Okay. So the point is, we samsaric beings, we are so infatuated, we are so enamored with samsaric pleasure that we somehow think that we are going to be able to somehow fix samsara, right? We might feel we're suffering now. Oh, I'm suffering. Yes. Oh, but why? Oh, it's because I'm in debt. If I get out of debt, then I'll be okay. Or, I'm lonely. I don't have a romantic partner. So then I'll find one, then I'll be happy. Or whatever it is, whatever these goals we set up for ourselves within samsara, it's just setting us up for failure. Okay. Which is why it's a bit of a harsh reality, but it's the reality. The Buddha is saying, well, as long as we are bound by our karma and afflictions, we are going to uh, experience one kind of suffering or another. Rinpoche, like to say this, right? We either we choose between the suffering of being single, no partner, or we choose the suffering of having a partner, right? We have the suffering of maybe, having no house, right? Renting, or we have the suffering of owning our house, right? So whatever it is, right? We have the suffering of being poor, or we have the suffering of being rich. So Shantideva, sorry, Aryadeva says in the 400 stanzas that the kind of less well off have the suffering of body, right? Whereas the well off, the wealthy, have the suffering of mind. But every day the world is uh, fully destroyed by these two sufferings. Understand? Hmm. Okay. So that is the suffering of change. And why then the Buddha taught the truth of suffering first. It's so that, now, I should say this, because some also think, oh, Buddhism's so pessimistic. Oh, all this talk of suffering, 8 types of suffering, 6 types of suffering, 3 types of suffering, right? The point is, I agree on one level. If the Buddha just stopped with the first two, right? Truth of suffering, truth the cause of suffering, it would be, yeah, pretty pessimistic, right? Because then we're told, we're even told our normal samsaric pleasures, like watching a sunset or, I don't know, listening to nice music. Then Buddha comes and says, hey, that's actually suffering in nature. And if it was just the first two noble truths, you know, in other words, if there is no cessation of suffering, then I agree, probably better just to let us enjoy our music and sunsets and virgin pina coladas, right? But since there is the cessation of suffering, means there's an alternative, right? Then these teachings on suffering is so we drop our preoccupation, our infatuation with samsaric pleasures, so we turn to an alternative, right? Um, it says in the sutra that we are so focused on the small happiness that we give up the great happiness. But what we should do is give up the small happiness to achieve the great happiness. Understand? So these samsara pleasures, that's a small happiness. And because we're so infatuated with these, we spend all our life in the pursuit of them. Hmm? And in so doing, we actually are giving up the great happiness of nirvana, enlightenment. Yeah? But instead, what we should do is give up those small happinesses in order to achieve the great happiness. Yeah. So it's not so much that these uh, samsaric pleasures are kind of bad in and of themselves, but let me share a story. I can stop the share for a second. Okay. All right. Here's a story. So those of you who know me, I have to say, I'm a bit of a foodie. Okay. I like good food. Now, you have to understand, I lived at Seta J, you know? Setaje Monastery in rural India. Okay. And, for so many years, okay, our lunch, one day we had rice and dal, dal, lentils. One day, rice and dal. One day, bread and dal. Then, next day, rice and dal. Then, bread and dal. Oh, and one banana. Okay. So then I started teaching at the center in Bangalore. Yeah. So Bangalore, big city. It's like 7 hours away from Seta in a bus. I'll go there about once a month. And then going to the city, ooh, all sorts of other restaurants, right? Available. Okay. So we found this place called Little Italy. Very nice Italian food. Well, again, I'm not sure on an absolute level, like people from Italy come, they'll be like, what is this? But anyway, for me, I thought it was very nice. And when I would give uh, in the teachings, like examples on attachment, I started to bring up a lot of these like Italian food kind of things, Lama would talk about chocolate a lot. I would be talking about Italian food. So then the people in Bangalore were so nice. They'd be like, okay, Venerable, we'll take you out for Italian food after the teaching. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So go to Little Italy, so nice. Then next month, I'm looking forward to it, okay? And then we go, it's closed. It's closed. Gosh, the suffering. So then they see in my face, I'm so, what am I gonna do? Then they're so kind, they're so kind. I love them, right? Three of them getting on their phones. Oh, wait a minute, don't worry, don't worry, don't worry. Then, oh, don't worry. We found another Italian place. Yay, let's go. So we go. But Bangalore, such bad traffic. Okay. So we go to this Italian place. It takes an hour. Then we come back. It takes another hour. So then in the car, when we're stuck in traffic, I have this thought. I just have basically wasted 2 hours of my precious human rebirth going back and forth for the Italian food. So it occurred to me, the problem with samsaric pleasures isn't themselves, but they're so damn time consuming. They're time consuming. Time that can be better spent practicing Dharma. As we see in the Precious Human Rebirth teachings, Lama Zopa Rinpoche always talking about the benefits, like 35 Buddhas, prostrations, right? Even reciting the name of one of the Buddhas one time can purify hundreds of thousands of eons of negative karma, right? It might take us, even if we can't do the full prostrations, even just to recite those names once, might take, what, 90 seconds? But we've purified so much. Then that one, oh, so difficult. I don't have Namjong, I don't have time for practice. It's so easy for you as a monk in the monastery, but I have my worldly responsibilities. So hard to practice, right? Hmm? That's what people tell me. The best students, when I ask in the centers, I ask people, oh, so how much do you practice in a day? And like the kind of all stars I've seen, 2 hours a day, right? It's great. Most people, 15 minutes. Yeah. Be honest. I mean, not that I'm great either. I'm just saying we use the Dharma as a mirror. So, just like with a mirror, you look at your face, see, do I have any, you know? Anyway, point is, Then when it comes time for samsara pleasures, oh yeah, we'll drive across town for that best restaurant, right? We'll spend a lot of hours on the beach working on a suntan. Yeah. But practice, oh, no time, no time. Okay. Anyway, by giving up the small pleasure, we can achieve the great happiness, right? So that's why there's this emphasis on giving up the worldly concerns at the beginning of our Dharma practice. Now, I will say, oops, hold on, let me start that. I will say this, if there's the Italian food just there and we like it, it's not that then we say, oh, no, 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 no. Or here, at Copan in the beginner courses, right? They have the lunch line. It's like a buffet set out. So I tell people, it's not that we then look and it's like, okay, I like this one, I don't like that one. So the one I like, I'm not going to take. And then I only take the things I don't like the boiled potatoes or something. No, it's not like that. In fact, it is, the Buddha wants us to be happy, right? So by all means, if it's there, if it's ready, by all means, enjoy, right? But just be aware. If it's starting to take too long, like very easily, I see the Italian restaurants closed. Next door, there's a great Indian food restaurant, you know? So if I were to able to practice contentment with that, could I have 2 hours to recite Om Mani Padme Hum. Okay. So what I wanted to say, oops. There is this passage in this recognizing the false I. Okay. So all of these quotations are really good. I think they're pretty okay to understand. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Yes. Okay, so here. This quotation from Penchen Losang Chugi Gyaltsen, who was also the author of the Lama Tripa that we do, and the Geluk Mahamudra, said, there are many ways of reflecting on the hundreds of shortcomings of samsara. Hmm. This could be good too, right? Another translation for um, dungel or dukkha, shortcomings, right? It's a shortcoming. So here it said that even animals are afraid. Even animals are afraid of the suffering of pain and wish to be liberated from it. So suffering of pain or suffering of suffering, right? So His Holiness says if you threaten a dog with a stick, the dog runs away because it knows it will suffer. Or if a dog is hungry, it will look for food. It desires liberation from that suffering of pain. Okay. Then, even outer beings have renunciation of the happiness from contaminated feelings. Okay. So here's your Tibetan lesson for the day. Okay. So actually, in Tibetan, they don't really talk so much Buddhist, non-Buddhist. Those words are there, but they're not used as frequently as this one. Inner being and outer being. So inner being, Nangpa, and outer being, Chiropa. Okay. So here, the etymology is, all right, the inner being, the Buddhist. Let's start with the outer being. The outer being They are mostly concerned with arranging the outer world in a way that will give them satisfaction and reduce their suffering. Okay. So in a very real way, I think society has become very much outer beings, right? It's hot. We invent AC, we develop all kinds of drugs. We like pharmaceuticals. Well, the other drugs too, actually. We do the outward pursuit of happiness, satisfaction, right? Hmm? Whereas the inner being is, developing the mind, right? Developing the wisdom, developing these inner qualities to get the happiness, the satisfaction, the liberation. Okay? So here it's saying even outer beings have renunciation of the happiness from contaminated feelings. Okay. So of the three kinds of suffering, when we talk about having the mind of renunciation, mean wishing to be free from, the animals have the mind wanting to be free from the suffering of suffering. Yeah. Right. And then there's certain outer beings, and this is referring to the kind of the Hindu yogis who then see that even the contaminated feelings and contaminated happy feelings, right? That pleasure we get from eating nice Italian food, if we look closely, there's some shortcoming to it. Why? At the very least, it's because that happiness is dependent on an external object, right? That's a shortcoming. You don't have access to that all the time. When the Italian restaurant is closed, you can't have the happiness of pesto. Okay? So because it's dependent on something outside and we don't control the outside, that is a shortcoming. So these Hindu yogis, they meditate and they attain these states of, okay, we have the three realms of existence. In general, we have the six realms of existence, yes. Hell beings, hungry ghosts, animals, humans, asuras and suras. But we also have the three realms of existence, the desire realm, the form realm, and the formless realm. Have you heard of these? Okay. So how one attains rebirth in the form realm? Hmm? Well, after you attain shamatha, the calm abiding mind, you then engage in this type of concentration where you look at the relative faults of the desire realm, and then you see the relative advantages of the form realm. And through your concentration, you're able to suppress attachment and desire for the desire realm. Okay? Then, when you're reborn, those desire realm afflictions aren't there. You'll activate an affliction in the level of the form realm, and you'll be reborn there. Okay? Then, if you continue with that, you'll see between the form realm and the formless realm, you don't have a gross body like this. So it's even more peaceful, right? You just remain in this kind of blissful samadhi state. Actually, not even blissful. It's like a deep sleep. It's just peace. Yeah. Okay. So these outer beings have the renunciation from happiness of contaminated feelings means they even have a kind of mind of renunciation relative to the pleasures in the desire realm. Then they pursue these states of samadhi and get born in the form and formless realm. Okay? So let me share this quotation. It's from Lama Zopa cites this in the Lamrim Chenmo. Okay? All right. So those in the form or formless realm are beyond the suffering of pain and the suffering of change. They have by nature, they have the bliss of meditative concentration. They remain motionless for an eon. So peaceful. But even this most assuredly is not liberation. After they have counted on it, they will again fall. Though it may seem as though they have transcended the turbulence of the miserable realms, yet, like birds soaring in the sky, they cannot stay forever, though they try. Like an arrow shot with the strength of a child, they'll fall back down in the end. Just as butter lamps that burn for a long time are in fact perishing every moment, they are afflicted by the changes of the suffering of conditionality. So this text, discussion of requisite collections. This quotation I've taken from Namjong. Lama Zopa cites it in talking about the suffering of uh, the devas, the higher realm beings. Okay, so they don't have suffering of pain or suffering of change, but they still have this suffering of conditionality, or in other words, the all-pervasive compounded suffering. So the all-pervasive compounded suffering, then uh, I have heard it explained that, so, pervasive means to like cover, right? So whereas the suffering of pain only is in the desire realm, but, and then the suffering of change, although it says those in form and formless realm are beyond suffering of change, uh, I think even the form realm has 4 levels. I think it's once you reach the third or fourth level that you're free of suffering of change. I think the first 2 have suffering of change. Anyway, we can analyze. Okay. But the point is, everywhere, desire realm, formless realm, they have this all-pervasive compounded suffering. Meaning, they have these aggregates that are produced by karma and affliction. And then, since they still have the afflictions, they will generate new karma. They'll generate new causes for suffering in samsara, right? So this is the compounded, right? Like compound interest, right? You get some, credit every day for the interest that's in your, bank account, right? So similarly here, why is this all pervasive compounded suffering? It means every moment that goes by, yes, we have this body, which is produced by previous karma and afflictions. And as long as we have the afflictions, we're going to create more causes for the future suffering. Therefore, compounded. So then Rinpoche talks about how then the real renunciation we need to have, okay? Yes, the animals have a thought of wanting to be free from suffering of suffering. Even some of these, Hindu yogis have the thought to be free from the suffering of change. But we as, like wise Buddhist practitioners, we need to generate the mind wishing to be free from the suffering of all-pervasive compounded suffering. Means to be free of the afflictions. Then and only then we'll be free from samsara. Okay? All right. So,
Venerable, we had a question in
oh,
chat.
okay. Yes.
Christina asks, would you please explain the form realm in this quote again, please?
Oh, sorry, Venerable. It's just because I think you already started to explain it, that there are 4 levels. I just thought humans were part of the form realm. That's why I was
No,
confused.
no. So we are in the desire realm.
Okay.
And then there's even, okay. So in the normal presentation of the 6 realms, okay, the 3 higher realms is human, asura, and sura. Okay. Or sometimes translated as human, demigod, and God. Okay. Then in the 6th, the so-called God realm or Deva realm, there are desire realm gods. Okay. So you'll remember the story in the context of the precious human rebirth. Yeah. Precious human rebirth, there's the non-human states where it's the three realms, the three lower realms, and then the fourth one, long life God. Right? Right. So the states where we don't have the opportunity to practice Dharma are the three lower realms, and then long life gods. And then in the explanation of long life gods, there's two. One is desire realm gods who are like frolicking in the samsaric pleasures, right? There's a story of the former doctor of the Buddha who, during his time in the Buddha's sort of retinue, has such respect for the monks that when he saw a monk coming, not even Buddha, just a monk coming, he would get off from his elephant. It takes some effort, right? Get off from his elephant and then, offer prostration. So then it says that Shariputra, through his power of clairvoyance, was able to travel to these God realm. And then he saw the former doctor. And then it says that, the doctor was frolicking with the celestial maidens. And so when he sees Shariputra, just kind of does that one, like some small gesture, because so distracted by all these, maidens he was frolicking with. I wonder if that's a euphemism. Anyway, so that's the desire realm gods. But then there are then the form and formless realm gods. And each of those, uh, they go through this process of looking at the lower one, desire realm versus first level of concentration. First level of concentration is better. Therefore, through the power of their concentration, they suppress desire realm afflictions. Yeah. And then once you get to the first level, by the way, you're doing this as a desire realm being. You meditate on these. So these Hindu yogis do this. They attain that first level of concentration of the form realm and so forth, and then go to the formless realm, and they can get all the way to what's the so-called peak of samsara, right? In the form realm, it's just first concentration, second concentration, third, and fourth. But then in the formless realm, I think it's like infinite space, infinite consciousness, Chiang Mei. It's like nothingness, and then peak of samsara, right? Anyway. This is explained, in great detail in other texts, but just for now, the point why this is brought up, I was just explaining how even non-Buddhists uh, can develop the renunciation, the mind of renunciation for the suffering of change. And even the non-Buddhists, hey, we many, many, many times have been born in these form and formless realms. And to do that, you don't need, wisdom of emptiness. It's still in samsara. Okay? All right. Okay. So then, yeah, we talked about this. The root of samsara is rooted in the ignorance. Okay? And basically, anyone who still has ignorance has the all-pervasive compounded suffering. Therefore, we need to eradicate that. Okay. So now, okay, let's go back to this one. Okay, am I back to the Lama Zopa text? Yes, okay, good. All right. So therefore, yeah, that's why the main renunciation we have to have is the renunciation of this third suffering, pervasive compounded suffering. Then Rinpoche. Ooh. A little bit short on time. So let me we did cover this a little bit, right? Then renunciation, and then talking how we also need bodhicitta. Then here, the meditation on emptiness. This is the thing I wanted to cover today, right? All right. So, okay. From the very beginning, focus your mind on your aggregates and how your mind makes up the label I. Concentrate on that. Then, now think the I is merely imputed by the mind, by the side of the mind. Concentrate on that, analyze that, try to discover that, try to realize that. Okay. Now, you see that the I that exists is most unbelievably subtle. Think and concentrate on that as much as you can, trying to realize that, try to see that. Okay. So, this talk of the mind labeling, things being merely imputed by the mind, this comes up so much, right? Merely imputed by the mind. So what does this mean? This is the important one, the tasty one, right? So it's a little bit okay. Let me switch back here. Let's open it up for discussion. Okay. It seems, right, if we look at this, how Rinpoche is now explaining the meditation on emptiness, we first concentrate on the I. Focus your mind on your aggregates. Aggregates means the body and mind, and how your mind makes up the label I. Concentrate on that. Now think that the I is merely imputed by the mind, by the side of the mind. Concentrate on that, analyze that, try to discover that, try to realize that. Okay, so now the question is, I'll stop this. I'll keep it up. This is how we meditate on emptiness, right? So is this thought that the I is merely imputed by the mind, is that the way to realize emptiness? In other words, which comes first? The realization of emptiness or the realization that the mind is merely imputed, or the I is merely imputed by mind? Okay. We're going to delve into something a bit technical, but you guys are smart and intelligent, so I think it's worth mentioning. You see, in general, when we have a logical syllogism, right? Okay, let's take the most common one we see in the Buddhist text. We take a subject, sound. It follows that it is impermanent because it's a product. It's produced by causes and conditions. That's the most famous reasoning. Okay, so we have a subject, and then what happens, right? Sound is impermanent because being a product. Okay, so now the person for whom this is going to be perfect reasoning, they don't know that sound is impermanent, right? That's what you're trying to prove. But they know sound is a product, and they know whatever is a product is necessarily impermanent, right? So for them, that's how the logic is going to work. They know sound is a product. They know that whatever is a product is impermanent, but somehow they don't quite know yet that sound is impermanent. Then you tell them, they think about it. Ah, yes. Okay. So now, uh, hmm, okay. Now you can imagine, hey, Namjong, um, I don't know, where are you from? Right? Well, that's a basic example. But if we were to say, okay, Namjong, right, is American because he's an American man, okay, would that logic be perfect? No. Why not? Because then you're supposing that someone knows that Namjong is an American man, but is still wondering, is he American or not? Okay. So the reason that you use still has to leave room for the initial doubt. Okay? You get me? More or less. So I'll put it another way. Uh, in general, the definition of impermanent means momentary, right? So if you realize something is impermanent, you necessarily realize that it's momentary. So you can't say the the sound is momentary because it's impermanent, because then you're saying the person already realizes that sound is impermanent, but they're wondering whether it's momentary or not. Okay? Think about this. Think about this. Okay? You can't say, you know, as your reason, something that is harder to realize than the thing you're trying to prove. Okay? Because your reason is the kind of boat that's going to take you to the realization. Hmm? All right. So now, why am I bringing this up? In the context of being merely imputed by the mind, okay? What does merely mean? Why do we say merely?
Are you asking us?
It's yeah, if you have an answer, yes. It can also just be a rhetorical question that you meditate on. But
Okay.
yeah, if you have an answer, you can tell me.
Simply,
Simply, okay, yes.
So we all agree.
So we all agree.
Yeah, like it's just like we merely impute something with a label so that we all establish like a common definition or a
Okay,
common label.
so we're getting into something. So let's go down a little bit. Okay, this is this is this is really important, and this is something that Rinpoche here he just glosses over, right? So here, you know, Rinpoche, this is just a one page down from where we were. He then talks about these four schools, right? Vaibhashika, Sautrantika, Chittamatra, and Madhyamika. Then Madhyamika have two divisions, Svatrantika and Prasangika. Okay? Then he says like this. The object to be refuted, according to Svatrantika Madhyamika, the view of the eye is totally existing from its own side without the mind labeling it.
I don't think we're seeing the text that you're seeing.
Really?
No.
Okay.
Probably need
I,
to switch the screen.
Okay. Let me do it then. How about now? Okay, good. So this is just a page down, right? Brings up these four, Swachanjika, Majjhimika, and Prasangika. Then saying, according to Svachantika Majjhimika, the view of the eye as totally existing from its own side without the mind labeling it is also there. The correct view, according to Svachantika, is that the eye exists from its own side, but it's also labeled by the mind. Okay? But the Prasangika Madhyamika view, that is totally wrong. Okay? So here, Svachantika holds that the eye is labeled by the mind, but not merely labeled by the mind. You understand? Labeled by the mind, but there is still something existing from the side of the object. Okay? Now let me go back. I have a slide about this. Okay? So what does Svachnitika say? Okay. Now there is this example in the text, right? Where an example of something being merely labeled by the mind, they say, imagine at the time of dusk, you have a coiled rope in your garden, right? Then, sun is going down, it's dark. You go into the garden, you see the rope, you mistake it to be a snake. You think it's a snake. Then the next morning, when there's bright light, you go out back into the garden, you see it's just a rope. Ah, you thinking, calling it a snake was just merely imputed by your mind. Right? That's what they say. Right? Understand? Mere imputation. So what the Svatrantikas say, okay, oops. Yes, phenomena are labeled by the mind. Yeah, they're labeled, they're designated. But there is something from the side of the object that possesses its own defining characteristic. This intrinsic characteristic, svala kansha, kanshana in Sanskrit, or rangiseni in Tibetan, makes it suitable to be labeled the table, the snake, the person. If there wasn't something from the object, if there wasn't an inherent basis, they say anything could be labeled as anything, right? Why, do we, this is an apple, can't we just label it a elephant? So if there's nothing from the side of the object, then anything becomes anything. Therefore, everything becomes nothing. Therefore, they actually hold that the prasangika have fallen into nihilism. Okay? So anyway, they accept things are labeled by the mind, but they're not merely labeled. Merely labeled means nothing from the side of the object. None of this rangiseni, no defining characteristics from the side of the object. Okay, so here. Okay, this is the Prasangika view. Phenomena exists only as what is merely labeled by the mind. There's nothing from the object's own side that establishes it as a thing, no inherent suitability. The idea that things need some intrinsic nature to be labeled is a subtle form of inherent existence and must be rejected. Okay? So now here, what merely is kind of excluding, the difference between labeled by the mind and merely labeled by the mind is when the Prasangika say merely labeled, they're excluding intrinsic existence. Now, for us, what's important is then, actually, in terms of realization, we first realize things are lacking inherent existence. Then we realize that they're merely labeled. You understand? They say emptiness is what they call a non-affirming negation, right? Yeah, okay. In our analysis, right, first we identify the object of negation, and then we refute it, right? So at that time, all we are realizing is that the object of negation doesn't exist. In this case, the inherently existing I doesn't exist. Then, okay, of those two, we say, all right, but it still exists. If it doesn't exist inherently, how does it exist? It exists merely labeled by the mind. It exists as a dependent arising. If it doesn't exist independently, how does it exist? It exists dependently. Okay? So the point is, right, in terms of realization, we need to realize the lack of inherent existence first. Then we realize things are merely labeled by the mind. Yet, that being the case, then why is Lama Zopa Rinpoche and all these other great masters, not just him, why is there this kind of emphasis on the merely labeled before we have the realization? So here, oh, yeah, okay, I should say this first, right? So merely labeled by the mind, this is then to understand why the Prasangika, they're not falling into the critique that everything can be labeled anything, and therefore everything is nothing. That's what the Svachantika say, right? So how then the Prasangika kind of refute that view? So merely labeled is, yes, it's merely labeled by a valid mind, independence on a valid base, but without any inherent nature from the side of the object. So then, this is conventional truth, but in general, the conventional truth exists, right? This is from Sankapa. 3 criteria. Has to be known to a conventional consciousness. And then no other conventional valid cognition contradicts it. So here, for example, the mirage. We have the appearance of water from the side of the mirage, but is there water there conventionally existent? No. So for the Swashantika, if things are merely labeled in mind, then they say we couldn't then distinguish between the mirage water and the real water, because they're both merely labeled, right? Nothing from the side of the object. What they say, there is something from the side of the object of the real water that makes it suitable to be labeled as water. But from the side of the mirage, there's nothing there, and therefore that's invalid. But no, what the Prasangikas then say is, no, it's not like that. There doesn't have to be something from the side of the water that make it. But the second one, if no other conventional valid cognition contradicts it as being as it is. So we have the appearance of the water from far away, but then when we go closer, we discover, oh, there's no water here. That is a conventional valid cognition that contradicts its existence as water. Therefore, it's not water. Okay. Then the third, if the reason that accurately analyzes reality doesn't contradict it. So then these other things like we could have an appearance, right? And this is your homework, evoking the appearance of the larger than life I. Okay. So that appears to the conventional consciousness, but a reasoning that is analyzing the ultimate nature, then later refutes it. So then even this intrinsically existent I, of course, it doesn't exist ultimately, but it doesn't even exist conventionally. Understand? It doesn't exist at all. Okay? So we are running out of time. So let me just say this. Which comes first? We talked about that already. So then this is what I wanted to say. Yes, to sum up, and then we'll have it a few questions perhaps, right? So the merely labeled by the mind eliminates any intrinsic or inherent nature from the side of the object. So to realize something is merely labeled, one has to have already realized its emptiness. Therefore, it cannot be used as the reasoning to establish emptiness, Yet, when Lama Zopa Rinpoche and the other great masters present this and keep saying merely by mind, he's presenting the view, not the proof or the reasoning. Presenting the view, then, this is my opinion. When we have that accurate view in mind, it gives us then something that we can then compare to the way the ignorance views. Okay? So these exercises he's giving us as we go out into the world, all this, then have this mindfulness, remembrance that everything is merely by the mind. It's to then, bring us this, like Aryadeva says, those with little merits don't even doubt this doctrine. But even entertaining a doubt about emptiness tears the foundation of samsara. Okay, so in that quotation, those with little merit don't even doubt how things exist and how they appear, right? They just believe everything totally as it is. But even by having a little doubt, entertaining a little doubt, do things exist the way they appear? It tears the foundation of samsara, means we start then this process of analysis and questioning. And then the more we question, the more we try to find the inherent existence, well, the more we won't find it. And that's how we get closer to reality. And that's how we tear the foundations of samsara. So we're out of time this week. Don't worry. Still have 2 more classes. So, but yeah, as I was reading through the text, that one thing about Sartantika, Rinpoche just gives 2 sentences. So I wanted to expand that. That's why you brought me on. Okay? So I hope it's helpful. Maybe we have time for a question, and then we can wrap up. Yes.
Oh, I have a clarifying question. When
Great.
you were talking initially about the comforts and renunciation, so you gave an example about the Italian restaurant, and I was thinking as you were talking, well, I've thought about it before, but anyway, this brought it back up. Is it that isn't there, so I have 2 questions. One is, isn't there some level of samsara comforts that we need as human beings to be able to practice effectively? And how do we reconcile needing those levels of comfort? It's like if I have a headache and it's really hurting, a migraine, like if I have access to medication because of the good karma that I've created, why would I not take the medication so I'm able to practice? You're saying no.
No, I'm saying, yeah, I'm
Oh, you're
like,
shaking your
I'm
head
saying
no.
this is a wrong view. For sure, take the medicine. Yeah, but yeah,
Okay.
finish. Go ahead. Yeah.
So if I have access to these level of comforts that I can use to make samsara just good enough so I can practice to get out of samsara, but with a mind of renunciation, is that okay? Or is it the issue that when we engage in samsara comforts, we don't have the mind of renunciation? I guess I'm trying to reconcile my own
Right.
practice,
Okay.
my access to comfort.
Okay. So, yes, take the medicine. You're right. We do need some level, we need to eat food. My point was, right, in that time, I could have just gone next door to the Indian restaurant and gotten the sustenance for my body, right? But because I wasn't satisfied, then, always seeking more, seeking different, seeking better, then that took up a lot of time. Okay. But you're totally right. This is our vehicle with which we practice, right? So in general, even for monks who have renounced the world, they do talk about the requisites that the monk can have. And so in general, food, clothing, shelter, medicine. Yeah, we need. But I'll tell a story. So back in the day, Lama Yeshe, some of you might have been to Tushita Meditation Center in Dharamsala. Okay. So this is in the 70s, and now there's a new Gompa, but in the 70s, it's quite an old building. Then there was one retreat room. And during monsoon, it's monsoon now, it rains a lot. Okay. And then, it rains and inside your room gets moldy, all this stuff. So there was one monk doing retreat at Tushita, and then Lama Yeshe comes in the room and says, "Oh, hey, how's your room?" And the monk starts by saying, "Yeah, it's all right, but they have this metal sheeting roof, so when it rains, it's quite loud, disturbs my meditation. Then there's a bit of dripping in there. Then my clothes get moldy." And then Lama Yeshe says, "Good enough, dear." Okay, so this mind, good enough, that's the one. In the calling the guru from afar, this one text Rinpoche is very fond of reciting. It says, we ask our Lama, please bless me to generate the thought of no need in my mind. Okay. So, yes, we need food. Yes, we need clothing. Yes, we need medical care. All this stuff. Great. But, in Tibetan, they say, having few wants and being content. That's a very tasty one. That's very good. So yes, if it's available, I think of what I was saying, if it's there, doesn't require, so much effort. You're at the buffet and it's there, have it. But there's also some benefit in just being content with what you do have, right? And this other thing about, taking the medicine, actually during this this intro course I'm teaching now, this thought came up. Oh, it's my karma to be sick. Therefore, if I take the medicine, I'm somehow like cheating my karma. No, 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 no. We don't use karma as an excuse. First, in the context, like even when we see people who are less fortunate than us, yes, there's some karmic explanation, but that doesn't mean we don't help them. It's their karma to, be destitute, but we help them. Okay. And then with ourselves, yes, though we have a headache today because we maybe have done some negative action in the past, that doesn't mean that this is the cross we have to carry. Take the medicine, be healthy. So now it is said that in the context of these things, even when we eat, there's this we do that with bodhicitta, and we think, okay, this food. Why are we eating food? Because it tastes good? No. Think the purpose of my life is to benefit all sentient beings. In order to benefit sentient beings, I have to continue to practice, study, meditate, so forth. Therefore, I need to sustain this body, be healthy. And therefore, I'm going to eat this food so I can sustain my body, so I can continue to benefit sentient beings. And then when we go to sleep at night, same thing. We sleep with bodhicitta. Purpose of my life is to benefit all sentient beings. I need to continue to practice tomorrow. So I need to rest. I need to practice self-care so I don't burn out. Okay?
Thank you, Venerable.
Yes. Thank you. So I see some people have to go, and yeah, maybe we leave it at that today. So maybe as a homework, continue to read through the text. You know where I've gotten to this distinction between the Svachantika and Prasangika. Then, next section is going to go into more of this labeling of the mind. So kind of contemplate what that means. And then next week, we'll continue with that. There's actually one exercise that I had. We kind of ran out of time, but I'll do it next week. And we will continue going to the path of liberation and enlightenment. So now, last thing before we take off, let us do a dedication. Oops, oh, I just closed it. Okay. I think it's page 310. No, a little bit. Okay. 320. Okay. So let's dedicate the merit we've accumulated our time here today. That may the supreme precious supreme bodhicitta not yet born arise. May that arisen not decline, but increase more and more. And for His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Actually, this prayer is for us, but it is for the long life of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. If His Holiness the Dalai Lama is able to live long, it benefits us, it benefits all the beings of this world. Therefore, incomparably kind and supreme Tenzin Gyatso, the wish-granting, wish-fulfilling jewel, source of every single benefit and happiness in this world, may you have a long life and all your holy wishes be spontaneously fulfilled. And then lastly, we'll seal with emptiness. Due to all the past, present, and future merit collected by me, and all the merits are 3 times collected by numberless Buddhas and numberless innate beings, which are completely empty of existing from their own side, may I, whom completely empty of existing from my own side, achieve the state of full enlightenment, which is completely empty of existing from its own side, and lead all sentient beings who are completely empty of existing from their own side to that state, which is completely empty of existing from its own side by myself alone, who am completely empty of existing from my own side. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank
See
you,
you next week.
Venerable. See you
Thank
next
you.
week.